Everyone laughed at her when she was changing diapers for a millionaire in a coma. A year later, everything suddenly changed. The young millionaire woke up and, "Hello, friends. We present our new story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the bell, like, and share your opinion in the comments." The strong scent of antiseptic mixed with the heavy silence of the clinic was part of Susan's daily routine. She had started working there just a month ago, but already felt the weight of the environment. The coma ward was unlike anything she had ever seen. The hallways were spotlessly clean, machines beeped at regular intervals, but most of all, it was the emptiness that drew her attention, as if life had stopped. Among all the patients, one intrigued her the most: Michael Stevens. He wasn't just an ordinary patient, he was a famous millionaire, owner of one of the country's largest tech firms. His name was in the news a few months back when the car accident that put him in a coma was deemed a mysterious tragedy. The car veered off the road on a rainy night, and although there was no clear evidence of foul play, rumors were persistent. Susan's contract stated that she was to monitor Michael's vital signs, measure his blood pressure, adjust equipment, and ensure his stability. Nothing more. But from day one, something about Michael touched her in a different way. Perhaps it was the contrast between the powerful figure in the headlines and the frail, immobile body trapped in tubes and machines. Or perhaps it was that even in unconsciousness, he seemed to carry an untold story. Other nurses did the bare minimum, but Susan could not treat him with such indifference. She cleaned his face, changed his diapers, and massaged his legs, and with her diligence came the jokes. "Hey, Susan, are you in love with your millionaire patient?" teased one of the nurses in the break room. "Maybe she thinks he'll wake up and leave her a fortune," another laughed loudly. Susan pretended not to hear, but each remark was like a knife to her heart. She knew she didn't do it expecting anything in return. It was simply the right thing to do. It didn't matter if Michael was conscious or not. He was a person and deserved dignity. But there was something more, something Susan couldn't explain. Every instinct told her that Michael, although trapped in this vegetative state, was still there. It was an intuition she couldn't ignore. Days turned into weeks, and the behavior of Michael's family only heightened her suspicions. They rarely visited him. His wife, Lisa, showed up occasionally, always in a hurry, as if his presence was a burden. His brother, James, would stop by for some conversation devoid of affection or concern. Susan began to wonder, why did no one want Michael to wake up? What started as a simple job turned into one of the biggest challenges of her life. And although she didn't know it yet, the care everyone mocked would be the key to uncovering the secret that would change everything. Days at the clinic followed their monotonous rhythm, but Susan's heart was far from restful. The more time she spent with Michael Stevens, the more she felt that something was deeply wrong with the story. The meticulous care she provided contrasted with the family's indifference. It was as if everyone hoped he would never wake up. One grey morning, as she adjusted the equipment by Michael's bedside, Susan noticed something that had previously gone unnoticed. The impact on his head, partially hidden by hair, didn't resemble injuries typical of car accidents. It was clean, very precise, as if it happened before the crash. The question echoed in her mind, but there was no one she could turn to. Susan's curiosity began to extend beyond the ward. During breaks, she overheard whispers between doctors and Michael's family members. In one of these instances, she discreetly hid behind a partition and overheard Lisa, Michael's wife, arguing with his brother James. "You said the accident would take care of everything," Lisa hissed, her voice full of frustration. "He wasn't supposed to survive, but now, as things stand, it's just a matter of time before we get what we want," James replied coldly. Susan's blood ran cold. They were waiting for Michael to die. However, what worried Susan the most was not just the coldness with which they spoke of Michael's death, but their apparent confidence that he wouldn't wake up. as if they knew something no one else did. Determined to learn more, Susan began a cautious investigation. When she had the chance, she rummaged through Michael's medical records and found something that only increased her concern: medications that didn't align with the type of injury he had. That night, while mentally processing everything she had discovered, Susan made a decision. She couldn't continue ignoring what was happening. She needed concrete evidence. She decided to secretly start recording her interactions with Michael and, if possible, any suspicious conversations. While tidying Michael's room, she noticed something that almost made her drop the tool she was holding. His fingers moved. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible motion, but it wasn't a reflex. She knew that. Susan's heart skipped a beat. She took Michael's hand and quietly whispered, "If you can hear me, Michael, please try to respond." Nothing happened. But then, once again, he gave her a sign that he heard and understood what she was saying. He squeezed her hand. Susan felt tears welling up in her eyes. He was there, trapped in his own body, but fighting to come back. She knew she had to act swiftly, because if Michael was trying to wake up, his life was in even greater danger. Susan cannot forget that moment when she felt his fingers move in response to her touch. He was there and trying to fight the coma, but Susan knew not to celebrate victory too soon. If Michael was coming back, the danger was just beginning. Lisa and James would do anything to ensure he never woke up, and the only person who could protect him was her. In the days that followed, Susan intensified her care. Although other nurses mocked her for spending so much time on a hopeless patient, she spoke to Michael every day. She shared stories about the outside world, read the news, and described the weather. Each time she noticed small changes: a twitch of his brow, a light flutter of his eyelids, a quickened heartbeat when her voice filled the room. But Susan needed evidence. No one would believe her without tangible proof. She began secretly recording the signs of Michael's improvement, hiding the device carefully among the sheets and documenting them in her personal reports. Meanwhile, tension in the clinic grew. Lisa and James started appearing more frequently, but not to care for Michael. They were there to pressure the doctors and administrators, demanding the transfer of Michael's assets, claiming he would never recover. One night, when everyone had left the wards, Susan went to Michael's room for her usual care. Holding his hand, she felt a slight grip. This time, it wasn't subtle. The grasp was strong and deliberate. She gasped in surprise, and tears immediately welled up in her eyes. "Michael, you're here," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. Michael's eyes didn't open, but his hand squeezed again. He was trying to communicate. He was struggling to come back. Susan knew she couldn't wait any longer. The next morning, she showed one of the videos to the clinic's chief doctor, Dr. George. She hoped he would listen to her and see what was happening, but to her surprise, the doctor indifferently watched the video and said, "It's a reflex. Don't raise false hopes." Susan's heart sank. They didn't want to believe Michael would wake up. As she left the office, Susan passed James in the hallway. Their eyes met for a second, and there was something about his look that chilled her to the bone. He knew she was noticing more than she should. That night, upon returning to Michael's room, Susan discovered something that made her heart stop. The cables of the machine monitoring his brain activity were unplugged. Panic swept over her. They were trying to silence Michael before he could wake up, but Susan wouldn't let that happen. She was ready to fight at any cost. The sound of breaking machines in Michael Stevens's room echoed in Susan's heart with a silent scream. The monitor that once displayed his vital signs was flickering silently. Someone's malicious plan nearly culminated in deadly success. Susan acted quickly. With trembling hands, she reconnected the cables, checking Michael's breathing and heartbeat. His body responded sluggishly, as if battling an invisible tide. As the monitor stabilized, Susan exhaled air that had been stuck in her chest. For the moment, she saved him, but it only confirmed her worst suspicions. Michael wasn't in a coma by mere chance, and now the only person standing between them completing their plan was her. That night, Susan barely slept. Her heart was torn between fear and the necessity to act. She knew she could no longer trust anyone on the medical team, let alone Michael's family. She was alone. The next day, hiding her tension, she decided to follow James. She tailed him to one of the administrative offices, silently walked up to the door, and pressed her ear against it. James's voice was muffled. He was answered by a male voice. Dr. George, the very doctor who had dismissed her notes. "We must ensure Michael doesn't wake up. If she keeps persisting, she'll eventually lose her job or worse." Susan's stomach dropped. They were all involved in the conspiracy. The accident with Michael was not just an attempt on his life, but a well-organized plot. James and Lisa wanted to control Michael's fate, and Dr. George was helping keep him in a comatose state, ensuring Michael would never know the truth. But what they didn't expect was that Michael was fighting, and that Susan was ready to risk everything to save him. Susan's heart raced, and she knew she needed evidence. She returned to Michael's room and checked the medical cabinets. Among the bottles of medications, she found something that made her freeze, an unlabeled bottle of clear liquid. It was the substance Dr. George was using to keep Michael sedated beyond what was necessary. Susan hid the bottle, and that very night sought out a reliable lab for analyzing the substance. Awaiting the results, she continued caring for Michael, talking to him, encouraging him, feeling the ground beneath her slip. The liquid was a combination of sedatives and neurological blockers, enough to keep Michael in a permanent vegetative state. Now she had the necessary evidence, but she knew that with this new development, her life was in danger. Susan kept the envelope with the analysis results under the mattress in her clinic room. The proof that Michael Stevens was being kept in a coma deliberately was now a ticking bomb ready to explode, but she knew she had to be careful. One wrong move, and not only could Michael, but she herself disappear forever. In the days that followed, Susan continued to care for Michael with even greater attention. His small reactions to her stimuli became more frequent. His fingers squeezed her hand tighter, his eyelids twitched, a tear rolled down his face. He was fighting. She felt she needed to tell Michael the truth. He needed to know what was happening. One night, when everyone had left the ward, Susan leaned over and whispered to him, "Michael, you're not here because of an accident. It was your brother James and Lisa. They tried to kill you, but you survived. But now they keep you like this, trapped within your body. But I promise I will help you. We will get through this." As she spoke, tears flowed down Susan's face, and then she felt it. Michael's hand squeezed hers with a strength she had never felt before. The monitor next to the bed began to beep, registering a slight acceleration of his heartbeat. He was listening. "If you can hear me, Michael, try to open your eyes." For a moment, the room was silent except for the rhythmic sound of machines. Then slowly, Michael's eyelids began to open, first one, then the other. His eyes, cloudy and heavy, met Susan's. He had woken up. Shock and relief gripped her at once, but there was no time to celebrate. She knew if anyone discovered Michael had woken up, the threat to their lives would exponentially increase. Michael tried to speak, but his voice was raspy, inaudible. She handed him a notepad and pen, helping him hold it. Michael managed to write a single word: proof. Susan nodded and quickly explained about the sedative bottle and the lab report. Michael's eyes filled with restrained anger, but there was something more. Determination. "We need to keep this a secret," she whispered. "I will help you regain your strength, but no one can know you've woken up until we're ready." Michael slowly blinked in agreement. Susan and Michael worked together in secret. Gradually, he regained strength, was able to move his hands, sit up in bed, and eventually speak in a whisper. It was miraculous progress, but it needed to be concealed. Meanwhile, Lisa and James continued their periodic visits, confident that Michael would never wake up. They had no idea that a plan was brewing behind that door to reveal the truth. However, they knew time was not on their side, and they had to act before James and Lisa noticed any changes. Now that Michael was awake, the room that once was a space of silence and despair became the epicenter of a quiet plan to reveal the entire truth. Susan dimmed the lights and drew the curtains, creating an atmosphere of tranquility, allowing him to focus on recovery. Early in the morning, when everyone was up, Michael practiced simple movements under Susan's guidance. The first steps were painful, but he was determined. Every muscle in his body protested against the effort, but fury and the thirst for justice drove him. He was no longer the helpless man in that bed. Susan, in turn, continued gathering evidence. The vial of sedatives was safely stored, but it wasn't enough. They needed something that directly linked James and Lisa to the conspiracy. That's when Michael remembered something: home surveillance cameras from the night of the accident. Michael had installed a new security system at his mansion with automated recordings. There might be recordings revealing James and Lisa's involvement. It was a chance they couldn't afford to miss. With Susan's help, Michael contacted an old trusted friend, an expert in digital security. They explained the situation, and a few hours later, the friend managed to access the server. What they saw shocked them. On the video, James and Lisa were in the mansion's garage hours before the accident, discussing the plan to get Michael out of the way. "He's becoming an obstacle in our plans," James said irritably. Lisa, cold and calculating, added what needed to be done. They knew simply handing the video to the police wasn't enough. James and Lisa had powerful connections, and if they suspected Michael was awake, they could act before the truth came out. They needed a public bombshell that couldn't be covered up. They decided the perfect moment would be a shareholders' meeting appointed by James. The goal of the meeting was to formally establish James's control over the company, claiming Michael was in an irreversible state. Little did they know, Michael would be there to defend himself. In the days leading up to this event, Michael continued his recovery. His strength was slowly returning, but the drive for justice pushed him beyond limits he never knew. Susan was the only person he completely trusted. On the day of the meeting, Michael was ready. He dressed with difficulty, but with dignity, and alongside Susan got into the vehicle that would take them to the company's headquarters. What was about to happen would not only change their lives, but also reveal the truth to the world. The hall at the company headquarters was filled with shareholders and notable members eagerly awaiting James's announcement, promising significant changes in the company's leadership. The absence of Michael, presumed practically dead, gave James the opportunity to seize full control of the business. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, but also with false celebration. Lisa, impeccably dressed, stood beside James with a cold and assured demeanor. She already envisioned the moment when the official transfer would be announced. For them, it was the end of a long wait. Little did they know, their nightmare was just beginning. As James took to the stage, the audience quieted. He began his speech on an emotional note, recounting the tragic incident that left his brother in a vegetative state, expressing deep regret as he took responsibility for leading the company forward. Michael was always a distant person, but sadly, his path has come to an end. "With your support, I will continue the legacy of our family," James said with a complex tone of humility. The applause that followed was brief and abruptly interrupted by an unexpected sound, the sound of the main hall door opening with force. All eyes turned to the entrance, and there he was, Michael Stevens, standing in a pristine suit. Although bearing marks of his struggle with the coma, He walked slowly down the central aisle, slightly leaning on Susan. An absolute silence filled the room. Faces that once wore confident smiles now bore expressions of pure shock. James instantly turned pale. Lisa took a step back, her face losing color. Michael stopped before the stage and, with a still raspy yet authoritative voice, said, "I am not dead, James, and I'm here to clear everything up." The accusations spread across the room like a wave before James could react. Michael raised his hand, signaling Susan. She connected a laptop to the main screen in the room, and the video began rolling. The footage showed James and Lisa in the mansion's garage discussing the plan to cut the brakes on Michael's car. Their words, clear and undeniable, were damning. James tried to interject, stammering apologies, but Michael looked at him coldly and resolutely. "You tried to kill me, James, and you, Lisa, the woman I vowed to love, betrayed me in the worst way. But you forgot something fundamental. The truth always finds its way out." At that moment, police, already alerted by Michael and Susan, entered the hall and arrested James and Lisa before everyone's eyes. Their humiliation was complete. The awkward silence turned into murmurs and dirty glances. When everything was over, Michael turned to Susan. The hall was still in shock, but his gaze was fixed on her. "If it weren't for you, I would never have come back." Susan smiled as tears ran down her face. "You were never alone, Michael. I just helped you find your way back." Susan, the nurse everyone laughed at, proved to be the woman who saved his life and restored justice, and in Michael's heart, she would always remain the reason he got a second chance. After the dramatic exposure, life was getting back on track, but now on new foundations. Michael's recovery continued, and now he had strength not just physical, but moral. Knowing that truth had triumphed, he found new zest for life and the mission he wanted to continue. Susan became not just his support, but a friend. She spent a lot of time with him, helping restore lost skills. She brought him books, music, and shared news to keep Michael informed about everything happening in the world. Michael's company felt the changes as well. After James and Lisa's arrest, many employees and top managers were shocked, but also inspired by their leader's return. Michael returned to actively participating in the company's management, holding regular meetings and making important decisions. But Michael's feelings for Susan were growing more complex. He was grateful to her for all she'd done for him, but also felt something more. Her care, devotion, and ability to see the person in him when others only saw millions made her special to him. "Susan," he once said to her when they were sitting together in his office, "I can never repay you for everything you've done for me, but I can try. I want you to stay by my side not just as a nurse, but as a partner, a friend, and if you're willing, a member of my team, an assistant and an advisor." Susan was shocked by his proposal. "Michael," she replied, "I was always by your side not for a reward. You became more than just a patient to me. You became dear to me as a person. And yes, I'm willing to stay by your side and help you in every way." Their partnership became a symbol of a new chapter in Michael's life and the company. Susan was given the helm of the charity department, where she could implement her ideas and help those in need. Together, they launched a new program aimed at supporting healthcare for people in critical conditions, to break barriers and improve conditions for those on the brink of life and death. As time passed, Michael and Susan's relationship grew only stronger. They spent evenings talking about life, sharing dreams and plans. Michael realized he had found his second wind, not only thanks to his return, but also thanks to this woman who had become dear to him. One evening, sitting on the roof of his mansion in Boston, Michael turned to Susan and said, "You know, after everything we've been through, I've realized that the most important thing is having someone by your side who believes in you, even when you've lost faith in yourself. Susan, I want you to know that with you, I feel alive." Susan smiled, her eyes glistening with the light of the setting sun. "I will always be there, Michael. We've faced challenges, but now I know that there's only the best ahead of us." And with those words, their new chapter was just beginning. Ahead lay new challenges, new dreams, and new victories. But one thing was clear. Together, they could handle whatever life threw their way. Gradually, as he regained his health and strength, Michael returned to his full duties as CEO and became an example of resilience and determination for many. Susan, his faithful companion, became not only his right hand, but also an inspiration for others. And every day, waking up, they knew they had each other, that their friendship and slowly blossoming feeling of closeness had made them stronger. Together, they looked to the future with hope and faith, ready for new heights and discoveries. Several months passed, and Susan and Michael became inseparable. Their shared goals and missions brought them even closer. They exchanged dreams and supported each other in all their endeavors. Such close cooperation inevitably led to the development of deep feelings. One quiet evening, as they sat on the terrace, inspired by the sunset and the warmth of each other's presence, Michael took a thoughtful step. He turned to Susan, his eyes gleaming with determination and love, and said, "Susan, you have become an integral part of my life. Over this time, I have realized that I love you. You not only saved me, but also gave me a new life. Will you marry me?" Susan felt tears of joy well up in her eyes. She knew that feeling was mutual. "Yes, Michael," she whispered with a smile and excitement in her voice. "I love you too, and yes, I will marry you." From that moment on, their life together became even more harmonious and joyful. On their wedding day, as Susan walked down the aisle and Michael waited for her at the altar, they both felt that they had gone through all the trials for this moment. Their hearts were filled with only love and mutual respect. The ceremony was simple but touching. All those close to them gathered to celebrate their union and the new life they began together. Through all the trials and tribulations, they found love and happiness. Susan and Michael, now husband and wife, continued their journey forward, supporting and inspiring each other. And every day, looking at each other, they knew that their love was capable of overcoming any obstacles, just as it was at the very beginning of their story. Did you enjoy this story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to not miss new releases. See you soon.